Given how I felt about the Vampire Diaries and the way that show was going, I was very skeptical about watching the originals. However, my favorite characters in the Vampire Diaries were the originals, and I always wanted to know more about them and I wanted to see more of them. So I gave it a shot, and it was way better than the Vampire Diaries. Now, don't get it twisted, like the show has a lot of issues, but overall, I enjoyed it so much more than the Vampire Diaries. The reason being is that it doesn't focus on who's dating who or this guy likes that girl or that girl likes that guy. That's not front and center. It focuses on the plot, the originals, the family, and whatever opposition they may have. And it was interesting because I was trying to like figure out what are they gonna do, like who are they gonna have, or what's gonna happen that's going to oppose the originals because they're so overpowered in comparison to every other vampire and most creatures or most beings that like they have to come up with something good. And they did. I mean, I didn't necessarily like them, but I mean, they made it happen. The show basically feels like a war between gangs. Like you have the humans, you have the originals, you have the vampires. Even though the vampires are, I mean, the originals are vampires, they have basically a separate community because the originals are always family first, not vampires. So you have the originals, vampires, werewolves, witches. Am I missing someone? I don't think I'm missing anyone else. But yeah, and each of them are fighting to protect their own or trying to fight for what they covet and stuff like that. It's not about romance. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I have a problem with romance because Elijah and Haley, two of the main characters, they're in love with each other and that's fine, but I love that even though Elijah has feelings for Haley, he puts his family first because he's essentially the patriarch of the originals because he's the oldest and the wisest, but he knows what needs to be done. He wants his brother's redemption. Like he doesn't want like to stir up drama in his family or anything in any way. So despite the fact that he's in love with Haley, he puts that aside for the better of his family and his niece. And I love that and respect that so much. Like you feel strongly about a person, but in real life sometimes even though you care about someone and you love someone, it's not always the best idea to be with them for whatever the reason. So they definitely handle the romance in the show a lot better, and the character development is amazing. At least for most characters, not necessarily everybody, but Klaus, his character development is incredible. And Elijah, I don't know, Elijah kind of regresses, like he kind of gets worse, which I didn't really like. And Rebecca, I mean, Rebecca's Rebecca, and Haley, she seemed to get wiser and smarter and more mature as the show like dragged on. And Marcel, I like Marcel, but at times it felt like he regressed a little bit. And Davina, oh my gosh, she's one of the most annoying characters I've ever seen on TV. Like between her and Elena, that's a tough one. The show is only 5 seasons, and I'm really glad they decided to cut it off because the Vampire Diaries was just dragged out, and they kept doing the same thing over and over again. And it started to feel that way in the originals, but they cut it off. I think the best season is probably season 1, and then season 3, then season 2, then season 4, then season 5, in that order. I think I like the plot in season 3 the most. The problem is there was too many plot devices, that there was things that were just there to be convenient that they've already had in the past, and then they just kept doing that, essentially just keep moving the story forward. It's not necessarily the best one, but it's the one that I enjoy the most. And we get to see the first vampires created by the originals, aside from Sage, who I think was made by Finn, if I'm not mistaken. I like the whole prophecy thing, how like events unfold over time, and no matter what they do, the prophecy always comes true. So I really like that. I did not like season 2's plot because in season 1, the way it ends, how they are betrayed by the Guerrero werewolves, who they didn't know were Guerrero werewolves, and they use those black stones essentially to take over the French Quarter or take over New Orleans. But then in the very first episode of season 2, the originals beat them. So what was the point of all that? And then after that, it's a new threat, which is the original family, Finn, Cole, and Esther, and the body of witches, which doesn't bother me too much. But then after that, there's another like antagonist in the form of Dahlia, who I never knew of. If they mentioned her in the Vampire Diaries, sorry, I do not remember. But I just think it's kind of dumb that they just have out of nowhere some all-powerful witch that is related to the originals. And then in season 4 and season 5, I just felt like they just ran out of ideas because they literally used the same thing in season 4 and 5. So that's why I'm really glad that they cut it off right there instead of dragging it out longer. I think what I hated about this show the most is that it was dragged out too long. I would have loved it a little bit more if they made the seasons slightly shorter so they didn't have any like filler type of episodes where they could have just condensed it a little bit and just focused on a very rich story. I'm also disappointed in that they didn't have Michael for like the antagonist of season 2. He could have been like a secondary antagonist anyway, or had more of a role, but he didn't. He kind of just showed up and then he disappeared and then he came back. I also really don't like the way the originals always make threats. Like, they threaten everybody, but sometimes they don't even follow through with them. So like, they don't need to throw that in all the time. If you're the viewer, you already know what they're capable of, you know how powerful they are, so it's not necessary to have Klaus or Elijah or Rebecca, I mean mostly Klaus and Elijah, like constantly threaten everybody, but then not follow through with it. And regardless of whether they follow through with it or not, and Klaus especially, the threats are always very melodramatic. And Elijah and Klaus are like always at odds with each other. They're always fighting, and I don't like the way they make it seem like they're never gonna like make up and get over it. Like, always and forever. Like, that's a line they push throughout the entire series. And I mean, it's okay for brothers to fight, but you don't have to just make it a point to just, well, I'm never gonna have your back again. I'm never gonna protect you. I'm never gonna stand by you. Like, we all know the very next episode you're gonna be completely fine, so there's no reason to have that season after season after season. It's also very petty and childish. I mean, there was a scene in season 1 where Klaus finally got Elijah back. I mean, I guess technically he didn't get it back, but yeah, Elijah returns to his family and he's trying to have a peace offering by offering Elijah someone to drink blood from. But Elijah says forgiveness can't be bought. He'd rather just see contrition and personal growth. Like, I fucking love that. But then later in the season, I have protected you, I've stood by you, blah 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 blah. Like, how do you go from being so mature and so calm and collected to this? The whole thing with Marcel about him becoming the Beast or an upgraded, enhanced original, I had no problem with him being one. I just don't like that they used it as a means of making him an antagonist, and then they kind of throw that away because then he just kind of takes a back seat and the Hollow is front and center, and that becomes the antagonist. Why not have made him the antagonist for season 4? Because if he was so powerful and he can kill an original with just one bite, that would have been more interesting to me than the Hollow. Like, he was so angry at the originals for like essentially letting Davina die, but she was dead anyway, and even if she came back, Lucien would have just killed everybody. Like, even if Vincent succeeded in separating the mortal world from the ancestral realm, Lucien could have still killed everybody. So it just made no sense why he just threw so much rage towards the originals when that was probably most likely going to happen anyway. And it's not like they had a lot of time. But yeah, this show was way better than the Vampire Diaries. It wasn't perfect, it had a lot of flaws, like every show does, nothing's perfect. But I mean, I wouldn't even have it in my top 10. I enjoyed it, I watched it, not so much season 4 and season 5, but the first 3 seasons were pretty solid. And the ending was pretty good with it coming full circle with Klaus redeeming himself, and the acting was incredible. And then Elijah, because Klaus was redeemed, was also ready to go. So because Klaus dies in order to redeem himself, Elijah, and Klaus being redeemed, also decides to die. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment and a really beautiful way to end it. So yeah, pretty good show. Not in my top 10, but it's a decent show to watch. Way better than the Vampire Diaries. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. And I will catch you in the next video next Friday. See you then. Bye bye.